Good morning. My name is Mike Hernandez, and I'm with Protect Our Care, an organization that has been active throughout the Sunshine State this entire election cycle, calling attention to what cannot be described any other way than a Republican assault on our health care and the Affordable Care Act. We're going to run briefly through the program. We have, and you'll meet them all now as they speak, Karen Clay, Darlene Goodfellow, and Chelsea Bunch, who will be speaking and providing personal stories. We want to call attention today, the goal of today is to call attention to the fact that Governor Rick Scott has yet to call for his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to remove Florida from that atrocious lawsuit that threatens the protections for many Floridians that depend on the Affordable Care Act, but particularly those with pre-existing conditions, of which there are 7.8 million in the state of Florida. We find it to be unacceptable that our governor, who now wants to be our senator, does not stand up for Floridians who, through no fault of their own, have a condition that under the old system made them uninsurable. So with that, we're here to hear from, we'll first hear from Karen Clay.
We're out here today because once again, Governor Rick Scott has chosen to stand with big corporations instead of Florida families. After denying health care to over 700,000 Floridians by blocking Medicaid expansion, Rick Scott and his Attorney General Pam Bondi are now jeopardizing the health care of millions of Floridians with pre-existing conditions. There are over 2.5 million individuals with disabilities in the state of Florida, and each and every one of them have a pre-existing condition. Florida has the highest number of Affordable Care Act enrollees in the entire country, and will suffer some of the worst losses from Republican efforts to sabotage the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act's expansion of care means that hundreds of thousands of families across the state no longer have to live in fear that one sickness or accident could throw them and their families into economic ruin or put them so far in debt that they will lose their house and never reach financial stability again. If this lawsuit is successful, though, insurance companies will once again be allowed to charge whatever they want. For pre-existing conditions, it means that the premiums can go up, or as the disingenuous bill in Washington right now says, they'll allow pre-existing conditions, but insurance companies can determine what things they will cover for that pre-existing condition. When people can't afford preventive care or routine care, they end up in the hospital with bigger bills that they still can't afford to pay. As a family member, paying the massive medical bill isn't your main thought when your loved one is in the hospital and in need of care. They're also wanting to remove the clause from Medicaid that would allow people retroactively to go back 90 days so that when they are in hospital, they aren't concerned about how the bill is going to be paid, but only that their loved one becomes well. My family knows what happens when you don't have access to care. When my boys were little, they each had a pre-existing condition. One had asthma, and my other son is disabled. I had to pay an insurance premium for both of them for 6 months before they were covered, living in fear every day that what if my son had an asthma attack, or what if my other son needed to go to the hospital. That's no way to live. In addition, they would allow lifetime caps to be put back into place, and that is something that we absolutely do not want either. So the question we should ask is, why would we ever want Rick Scott to be our vote and our voice on health care in the United States Senate? It's ridiculous. Under Rick Scott, Florida has become a state of the working poor. Across the state, 45% of households qualified as working poor. That means nearly half of this state struggles to afford even basic necessities like transportation, food, and housing. This is part of the reason 700,000 Floridians fall into the Medicaid gap. And that's 700,000 Floridians Rick Scott has blocked from access to health care through Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. In fact, our Republican state senator right here in Tampa, Dana Young, helped block Medicaid expansion in Tallahassee. She sided with healthcare executives and insurance companies over low-income families here desperately need access to affordable health care. Don't think we've forgotten about you, State Senator Young. Rick Scott has also called for the repeal of the health care law. While Florida has benefited more than any other from the Affordable Care Act, and would be hurt more than any state if it were repealed. And right now, Scott is trying to pretend like his left hand doesn't know what his right hand, Attorney General Pam Bondi, is doing. She is trying to strip the pre-existing condition coverage while siding with other states in the lawsuit in Texas. Scott could pull Florida's name from that lawsuit with one phone call. Our leaders should be working to help more people get coverage, not working to kick hard-working Floridians off their insurance and making health care harder to get for more than 7.8 million Floridians in this state with pre-existing conditions. We can't trust Rick Scott to look out for our best interest in Washington, D.C. because he's refused to do so as governor. I hope everyone at home will join us today in demanding that Governor Scott remove Florida from this devastating lawsuit.
And now we'll hear from Darlene Goodfellow.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about an issue that's very important to me. My name is Darlene Goodfellow and I live in Valrico. And like nearly 8 million other Floridians, I have pre-existing conditions. Because my husband and I are both self-employed, before the ACA, the only health insurance available to us was a high deductible plan, which costs us hundreds of dollars every month, even though we could never afford to use it even once in nearly 20 years. If our children needed to go to the doctor, we paid out of pocket. When our then teen son broke his arm twice in the same year, we were forced to pay the doctor bills and x-rays for his arm to be set in a cast out of our savings. The second time the break was more complicated and the orthopedist recommended surgery. Because we couldn't afford the nearly $20,000 in deductibles and copays, we were forced to ignore his advice, and we were extremely fortunate that his arm healed without complication. During that time, I ignored my own health as well and walked around for years with undiagnosed glaucoma, hypertension, high cholesterol, and type 2 diabetes. Thanks to the ACA, I was finally able to receive diagnostic testing, including my first mammogram at the age of 57, which required a needle biopsy of an abnormal growth. Thankfully, the results were benign, but I require more frequent mammograms and prescription drugs now to maintain the improved health that I was able to achieve. Thanks to the regular care of a physician, some lifestyle changes, much of it made possible by the ACA. All of my medical conditions are very treatable, just as long as I can continue to have access to doctors, routine diagnostic testing, and prescription drugs. This is all dependent on stopping those that would take us back to the pre-ACA days. Before 2010, we lived in a very different world where having a pre-existing condition meant that you were not insurable. In other words, millions of people just like me could not purchase a health insurance plan. That is until Congress passed and President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law. Since then, insurance companies cannot deny coverage to millions of us with pre-existing conditions, choosing to only insure the healthiest and deny coverage to those who need it most. Despite several legal challenges and efforts in Congress to sabotage the law, the Affordable Care Act remains in effect, including the protection for those of us with pre-existing conditions. But that could change thanks to our very own Attorney General here in Florida, Pam Bondi, who had our state join a lawsuit to strip protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions out of law. If the lawsuit is successful, 7.8 million Floridians would go back to the world before 2010, where insurance companies are allowed to discriminate against people having a pre-existing condition, allowing them to pick and choose who gets health coverage. It's not just Pam Bondi threatening to take away these protections. Governor Rick Scott has done nothing about his own Attorney General's lawsuit that would strip protections from the nearly 8 million people in his state, even as major patient groups, healthcare professionals, and other Florida electeds have detailed how this lawsuit would result in dire consequences for patients with serious illnesses. Additionally, Ashley Moody, the Republican Attorney General candidate running to replace Bondi, has promised that if elected, she would continue to pursue this lawsuit to strip the ACA's protections in Florida's name. While Bondi can hide because she's not up for re-election, Governor Rick Scott now wants to become our U.S. Senator and replace Bill Nelson. Bill Nelson, who cast the deciding vote in the Senate to expand healthcare access, cast the deciding vote to ban insurance companies from discriminating against patients based on pre-existing conditions. Rick Scott has tried to weaken healthcare in Florida since he first showed up here to buy his waterfront mansion. He defrauded senior citizens out of their healthcare money in the private sector, urged Congress to repeal the Affordable Care Act, refused to expand Medicaid under the ACA after it passed, and urged Trump to repeal the Affordable Care Act and its protections for pre-existing conditions on day one, in his own words. Now that he's running for Senate, it's clear he doesn't want voters to know he wants to strip their access to health care. So while his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, sues to strip away our health care protections, Rick Scott sits idly by, refusing to pressure his Attorney General to remove Florida from the lawsuit and hoping we all don't notice. The governor of Florida would have us believe he doesn't even have his Attorney General's number saved in his phone, or maybe they aren't even on a first-name basis. In other words, Rick Scott, we call BS. There are plenty of Floridians who would stand where I am today and give similar stories about how they were denied coverage because of a pre-existing condition, or how they still struggle to afford and maintain coverage as GOP sabotage efforts are increasing premiums and limiting healthcare options once again. Healthcare is the most important issue for many Floridians too, especially low-income Floridians. Yet the people in power in Florida for the past 8 years appear to be doing everything they can to hurt our state's most vulnerable. In a state with more citizens on the ACA than any other state, with 7.8 million citizens with pre-existing conditions, it's been disappointing to watch every single Republican on the ballot this election promise to stand behind ACA sabotage efforts. It's time that Pam Bondi and Rick Scott do the right thing and protect the millions of their state constituents with pre-existing conditions. And to all Floridians out there, we hope you'll join us to demand that Rick Scott and Pam Bondi remove Florida from the lawsuit, seeking to knock down the protection of all of us with pre-existing conditions. Protect our care.
And our final speaker, Chelsea Bunch.
Good morning. My name is Chelsea Bunch. Thank you for joining us this morning. 8 years, 5 months, and 21 days ago, President Obama signed into law the Affordable Care Act, passed by Democrats 2 days prior, opening the door for millions of Americans to receive quality and affordable health insurance. Americans day for the health care that I receive through the Affordable Care Act and the high-quality medical care it has allowed me to access, which would be completely inaccessible to me otherwise. We've come a long ways, but Republicans are working day and night to undermine the Affordable Care Act, including Governor Rick Scott. It wasn't enough for Rick Scott and Republicans in the Florida legislature, like our own state Senator Dana Young, to refuse to expand Medicaid for over 700,000 Floridians. But now, on his way out, Rick Scott's Attorney General has signed Florida onto a heartless lawsuit that would once again allow insured companies to deny care to over 7.8 million Floridians with pre-existing conditions. This lawsuit is part of a larger effort to undo the progress of the Affordable Care Act, an effort that will continue to thrive if Florida Republicans up and down the ticket from Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis to Ashley Moody and Dana Young win their elections. Even though more Floridians rely on the ACA for care than in any other state, all these politicians have actively worked to block Florida citizens from benefiting from the ACA. Last year, Ron DeSantis voted once again to fully repeal the ACA and protections for those with pre-existing conditions. This year, he stood in front of a Republican crowd and said he didn't believe healthcare is a right for Floridians. Repealing the ACA would also jeopardize the care of millions of Florida seniors, as it would undo the current reforms that limit how much insurance companies can charge older Americans. Before the ACA, insurance companies used to charge as much as 60 times more what they charge a younger person with the same policy. If the protection is eliminated, seniors in our state may no longer be able to afford health care, and in turn lose coverage. Furthermore, this lawsuit creates yet another cloud of uncertainty for insurers all over the country, just as they are beginning to set rates and propose premiums for the next year. The timing of this sabotage effort is calculated. Republicans know that when insurers feel uncertainty, healthcare costs spike even more for Florida families. If Rick Scott and Pam Bondi's lawsuit prevails, coverage for millions of Americans, protections for pre-existing conditions, and any semblance of stability in our healthcare system would disappear overnight. On behalf of all Floridians, especially the 7.8 Floridians like myself with pre-existing conditions, we call for Rick Scott and Pam Bondi to withdraw from Florida from this horrible lawsuit. Put aside partisan politics and instead work to ensure that